As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast with Derek Brown on the NASM Podcast Network.
Welcome, listeners, to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, where we share tools and information that you can use to drink more mindfully. I'm your host, Derek Brown. I'm an NASM certified wellness coach, award-winning bartender, and author of Mindful Mixology, a comprehensive guide to no and low alcohol cocktails. And today, I'm going to start out with a dad joke. That is, this episode will put you to sleep. And I mean, quite literally, in the sense that we are going to talk about alcohol and sleep, and hopefully it will help you to sleep better. But first, I got to share that as a former bartender and night shift worker, I have a terrible history of sleep. So I can tell you that irregularity of my schedule, the fact that I was always working till the wee hours of the morning and sometimes working day shifts and blah, 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 all over the place. I had to get in my sleep wherever I could. And sometimes it was very little sleep. Honestly, I didn't mind at the time because I didn't realize that sleep was important, which sounds absolutely bonkers at this point, but is true. I essentially would brag about the lack of sleep that I have. All of these, I'd get like 4 hours of sleep, and then I would be like, see, sleep is for the weak. And what else is, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And all of these silly sayings about sleep that are completely and absolutely wrong. And not only that, they're bad for us. And so that was, part of my bartending life. And as an owner of a bar, I ended up just getting poor sleep. When I realized that sleep was important, it was this aha moment, and I thought to myself, gosh, I really have to change my relationship to sleep if I am going to be healthier, more productive, and have just a better mood altogether. Not to mention the long-term health effects of getting bad sleep, but we can go into that later. But I think that the thing that really changed my perspective more than anything about sleep is when I started thinking of sleep not just as this sort of absence of activity or this sort of dormant state, but really started to think about sleep as an active state. And there's so much going on. I'm not going to explain it all to you right now, but I have brought somebody who can really help unpack sleep for us, and especially sleep and alcohol. I'd love to introduce Dr. Jaime Tartar, who is the chair of psychology and neuroscience at Nova Southeastern University. She's also a distinguished professor and the co-founder of the Society for Sports Neuroscience. Welcome, Jaime. How are you?
Hi, Derek. Thanks for having me. Doing great.
Well, I'm glad that you're here today because we got to talk a lot about sleep. And the first thing I got to ask you is about that statement that sleep is an active state. Am I overstating things here, or do you think that that's accurate?
No, you're not overstating that at all. And I love what you said about changing your mind, about bragging about not sleeping. I mean, when you think about it, humans in general and humans on average, we sleep 8 hours a night. All animals sleep. And if we didn't absolutely have to sleep, and we didn't need it, this would be the worst mistake Mother Nature ever made, to put us down for 8 hours. So you're absolutely right. Bragging about not doing this is a terrible, terrible idea. And I'm so glad that you don't do that anymore. Because even though ostensibly we think that we are just shutting off for 8 hours and it might seem like a waste of time, your brain is very active and a lot of things are happening during sleep that can't happen when we're awake. So super
Right.
critical.
It's active and productive, really, in a way. Now I brag about the amount of sleep I had. I think today I had almost 8 hours, and I was like, yes. I have my Aura ring or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if we can say the brand, but I have my fitness tracker, and it tells me that I slept well, and I'm like, yes, that's great. So what is happening while we're sleeping? Do you mind sharing just a little bit of that information?
Oh, I'm super happy to share that information because I am here to sell sleep. I don't get any kickback from big sleep. But let's just start with the idea that sleep is of the brain, by the brain, for the brain. Sleep is mostly for your brain, and things happen to your brain when you're sleeping that just can't happen when we're awake.
Okay.
And some of these things are really critical to our health. So when we first go to sleep at night, we're going to mostly spend time that first part of the night. We're going to spend most of our time in what's called slow wave sleep. We're going to get most of our slow wave sleep in the first half of the night. So your brain, to your earlier point, it looks like it's doing nothing. It's like going at about 1 to 4 hertz. So it's really, really slow. But some things that are happening, one really critical thing that's happening is that your brain is taking out the waste from the day.
Wow.
All day long, our brains are so metabolically expensive. It's using like a lot of our calories that we're eating every day. And we just don't have time to clear out some of that trash that we're building up during the day. And at night when we're sleeping, that gives our brain a great opportunity to kind of slow down and clean itself out and get rid of some of those metabolic waste products that build up during the day. This is when a lot of our hormones are released in really high levels. A lot of our hormones are released throughout the day, but during sleep, the first half, a lot of growth hormone is released.
Wow.
And then as we transition to that second part of the night, we're going to spend more time in REM sleep or REM sleep. Even though we have all these stages all night long, the second part of the night, we're going to spend a little bit more time in REM sleep. And this is where our brain is really going to help process our emotions, allow us to be emotionally well. So this is a really critical and important time to help us manage our moods during the day. So these are just some examples of really critical things that happen to us and for us while we're sleeping.
That mood thing is so real, because the one thing that I've noticed about my own mental health is that if I don't get proper sleep, I mean, there's times still, I'm not perfect at sleep. I've gotten better at it and I've changed my attitude toward it. But most certainly there are times that I just get 6 hours of sleep, or sometimes even less, like if I'm taking a flight at night or something, or early in the morning. And those times I notice I just feel bad. Like I don't feel good about the world. So quite literally, like I'm open and I'm optimistic on days that I sleep. And then 5 hour, 6 hour sleep, all of a sudden I'm like, everybody's out to get me. It's the end of the world. It turns into a complete, my brain turns into a complete monster. This not only, I guess that's what you're describing, what happens, but what else happens if you don't get the sleep that you need?
Yeah, so exactly what you said. A lot of people in our lab, I'm in the business of studying sleep and stress and human performance. So I tend to do terrible things to people. So
Oh,
some
no.
of the studies we've done have kept people awake all night. And that's what we tend to see acutely is a lot, when we measure their brains and when we test them through these sort of psychological tests, we definitely see a lot of what we think of as emotional instability. And that's one of those, unwanted effects of sleep. We
Yeah.
know that just a lifetime of poor sleep is an overall predictor of early death. A lifetime of poor sleep predicts things like neurodegenerative disease later in life. And so you really don't want to think about this as a waste of time. And you want to think about this as health, right? Sleep is hygiene, right? So we wouldn't brag about other things the way we do not sleeping. I don't come to work and say like, oh, I'm writing a grant, so I haven't brushed my teeth for 3 weeks. I don't have time. It's just a lot. So, well, we do the opposite. I'll come to work, or so your colleagues will come to work and they'll say like, oh, I'm writing 5 grants, or whatever it is you're doing. I guess everybody isn't writing grants,
Right.
but the equivalent.
It's a fair example. We all have our grant to write, so to
Your
say.
writing analogy. Yeah, and so we wouldn't say like, oh, I've given up exercises. We might do the opposite and say like, oh, despite the fact that I have all these things going on at work, I'm still making sure that I'm eating well and I'm exercising. And we really want to do the same thing for sleep, because we don't want to brag about having a dirty brain and being an emotionally unstable person, usually.
I love that. A dirty brain and emotionally unstable person. Yes, I've been there. I've been there, sadly to say. But so wow. I mean, that's a lot that's going on. And that's just in like the immediate sense of it, right? Like just immediately you're going to feel those effects. And I know you all out there listening have felt these before. So it's real. But there's also long-term effects that health consequences really that happen from not sleeping. Is that correct?
And that's the idea, that sort of a lifetime of poor sleep, doing this for a long time. And when we talk about not sleeping, we don't usually refer to, we're not talking about one night of sleep deprivation. I know you said like sometimes when you're on a plane, and I don't sleep well on a plane. A lot of us don't sleep well some of the time. And I wouldn't even worry about it. Last night my dog had some belly problems. We were outside all night, and I woke up this morning and I wasn't even worried about it. The idea with sleep is like most things, I get it right most of the time, and those times that I don't, just let it go. Don't lose sleep over it. So we're just get it right get it right most of the time, and there's going to be times where it doesn't happen. I mostly eat healthy, but I have a cheeseburger every now and then, and it's fine. So it's really this idea of chronic sleep restriction. Someone who's constantly getting 5 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours, their sleep is all over the place. Doing that in the long term is really associated with kind of detrimental neurological issues like memory impairments and things like that.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And I like the advice not to worry about it, because obviously worrying would even exacerbate the problem and make it harder to sleep. For a while, I was reading a book on the health effects of sleep as I was preparing for bed. And I got to tell you that I had nightmares about sleeping at that point. I mean, it was just constantly worrying that I was not getting the sleep that I needed. So I had to chill out about that for sure and find a sort of routine. So I wanted to ask you about that. What are some of the positive things that you can do to encourage good sleep?
Oh, I shouldn't say it's so easy to get good sleep, because we all struggle with this. But sleep issues, aside from, medical issues, which are very treatable, like obstructive sleep apnea, a lot of people suffer from insomnia. It's very, very common. However, nobody should have insomnia. Insomnia is very treatable. A lot of insomnia is worrying, and we're really good as humans. We're very good at worrying. So one of the things to recognize is that if I was having like chest pains, I probably wouldn't go very long before I went to see a doctor. If I was having chronic migraines, I'd go see a doctor. And if we think about sleep as health and sleep as basic hygiene, which it is, if you are somebody who's struggling with sleep, I would definitely go see your doctor about this, and really thinking about somebody who's board certified in sleep medicine. And you can even seek treatment for insomnia. So it's one of the best ways to treat insomnia is through something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And this works really, really well. A lot of people do well and sleep much better when going through this, what's called CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia protocol.
Oh, that's great. You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, and my name is Derek Brown. I'm with Dr. Jaime Tartar, and we're talking about sleep. And we're going to get to alcohol in sleep in just a moment. And we just finished up talking about some of the things that you can do to improve your sleep. And one of the things I really like that you said, Jaime, is that basically that this is something that you should treat just as importantly as any other health problem. And we see this again and again with mental health issues. People tend to put those aside and focus on what they call physical health issues, right? Like, oh, I broke my knee. Okay, I got to go fix that. That one's obvious. I broke my sleep is less obvious to people, but just as consequential for long-term and even immediate health circumstances. So I'm really, really glad you shared that. But perhaps now we should use a moment to talk about alcohol in sleep, because I'm not going to give it away. Is alcohol good for sleep?
No, I think if it was, I probably wouldn't be on your podcast.
It was a cheap setup, I admit.
It's terrible. I mean, the reality is, and I don't like it, because I like red wine. I have to be very careful. Once in a while on special occasions. But at the end of the day, alcohol is a poison. It's a poison to our body and our brain. And the breakdown of alcohol creates a poison, and that's not good for our health. It certainly isn't good for our sleep health as well. And I can go into some detail about what specifically happens during sleep and alcohol if you'd like.
Yeah, part of me doesn't want to hear it, but I think, yeah, we got to hear it. So what happened? Okay, can we start here? What happens when you have like just one glass of wine?
So
And
it
sleep?
just depends on a few things. As you know, one of the things that matters is if you're a male or a female and how big you are.
Right.
Some things that matter are the specific enzyme variants that you've inherited from your parents that break down alcohol. But in general, a lot of the studies on sleep and alcohol really looked at moderate to high doses of alcohol. So a few drinks of alcohol before bed and how that impairs sleep. Once we have some alcohol before we go to bed, what alcohol does, and the reason some people take it and some people use alcohol before they go to sleep, is alcohol is very good at putting you down.
Yeah.
It works pharmacologically very similarly to the medications we use to go to sleep. So
Right.
it hits the same receptors that benzodiazepines hit, and it hits the same receptor that a lot of our sleep medications hit. And this is what's called the GABA system, so GABA. And the
Mhm.
job of GABA in your brain is to shut down your brain cells, basically slow down your brain. And slowing down your brain is a great way to feel relaxed. It's a great way to feel less anxiety. And it's also a great way to think you're going to sleep. So we sort of confuse sometimes the sedative effects of alcohol with real sleep transition. And it's sedation and sleep aren't exactly the same thing. And so what happens when you go to sleep is you have sort of this increased activity with the GABA system. And so in the first part of the night, you will get more non-REM sleep than REM sleep.
Okay.
But then what happens is in that second part of the night, we sort of get a rebound. So if in that first part of the night we were sort of shutting our brain down with alcohol, now we're going to get that rebound, and that sort of complementary system, the glutamate system, is going to come online, and we're going to now kind of abolish or impair our REM sleep. And if
Okay.
you remember, that's the part of sleep we talked about as being really important for emotion processing. So REM sleep tends to be decreased. And that second part of the night, when the alcohol wears off, in addition to that, now we're going to have a lot of restlessness, a lot of awakenings. So we tend to wake up more in the second part of the night. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. No, there's been many times where I've been drinking and then I start to go to bed like a baby, like no problem. I can sleep anywhere in that case, right? Like I've even slept when I was owned a bar. I would just put some of the bar chairs together and sleep on top of those, which sounds crazy, but it worked only because I was drinking. And I would always wake up. I'd always wake up and I never got a full night of rest with that. And I'd wake up in like a panic mode. And like the next day there's something that's referred to as the existential hangover. That's not just like the physical you know, array of effects that the hangover causes, but this sort of mental state where you're just like, oh my God, what did I do last night? I feel kind of nervous and panicky, and I'm not sure, what happened. Maybe that's just me, but that definitely happened along the way. Is that something that is attributable in some part to the lack of sleep?
Yeah, especially because we are the job of alcohol in general is to change your neurotransmitter systems temporarily. So it's really when that alcohol wears off, then we get sort of these rebound symptoms, and our brain takes a while to kind of recalibrate itself. So it's not surprising at all. It's just a lot of us, especially industrialized humans, or people who live in industrialized society, we feel a lot of anxiety, and we should, right? Our brain is completely not matched to the environment that we live in. And so anxiety is really common, and worrying is very common. And so a lot of times at night, we lay in bed and we think and we worry and we ruminate, and it's so normal and it's so common. And this is where people will tend to reach for the sleeping medications or reach over for, a glass of alcohol to help put them to sleep. And it's completely understandable. It's maybe not the best way to do that. We
Right.
said earlier that there's a lot of behavioral interventions that can help, and the cognitive behavioral therapy that we talked about with insomnia, it can also be used really powerfully to treat anxiety and a lot of those sort of nighttime worries. I would say for most people, not to worry about it in the sense that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not abnormal. A lot of people have this and worry, and it's completely common and very treatable. Yeah. So at night, one of the things that we like to have people do is to move away from relying on alcohol to help transition and help them go to sleep. And there's some really powerful ways that everybody can use to calm down their nervous system. I don't know about you. I've got my kids. They just turned 18, but it's crazy.
Oh yeah, hey, that's great. My kid's 9, so I'm not like the rate at which he flings his body in sports at like any player or anything makes me worry he'll make it to 18. So that's an accomplishment. Congratulations.
Yeah, I got. Well, I remember when they were little. Kids are kind of naturally good sleepers. They're much better at deep sleep than we are as adults. But I remember when they're twins and when they were babies, and I'm a terrible parent, terrible. But I even knew to put them on a routine. So when my kids when it was time for bed, we would do dinner and then a tubby and then pajamas and then a book. And we had this kind of wind down routine. And it was great for their brain because your brain is really a prediction machine. Your brain loves to know what's going to happen next, right? It's got to predict danger, right? So it helps the children, it helps their brain predict what's going to happen next. And then that natural part that we all impose on them, kind of like read a book, has kind of that, relaxing effect. Sort of, we don't read our book like, oh my God, and then the giant. We sort of, and then the little girl, and we have this relaxing cadence. And we sort of get away from that. It's the same brain as an adult, but we don't wind ourselves down in a natural way. And we don't give ourselves a chance for our nervous system to relax. So putting yourself on a sleep routine, it's just so wonderful for your brain, being able to predict that sleep is coming next and having something in there to calm down your nervous system. It could be yoga, it could be progressive relaxation, it could be read a book, something that helps you transition from high nervous system activity to that kind of rest and digest parasympathetic activity.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's incredibly helpful. And again, not reading books about the horrors of sleep is a good idea too. With my son, what I started doing is, actually when he was very young, I started doing this, is I asked him to tell me just 3 good things that happened throughout the day. And this was kind of based off of a positive psychology exercise that I had learned a long time ago, this sort of gratitude exercise. But I realized just get him thinking about the good things that happen throughout the day instead of ruminating on bad things, because that's what I always do. I always think about, oh my God, in the podcast, I said that one thing. Why did I say that thing? And then it just sticks there. But, try to get him thinking about good stuff. But also for myself, I will do coherent breathing. So I'll just take, between 10 and 20 minutes to do a breathing exercise where I'm slowing down my intentionally breathing through my nose. And it really, really helps me to feel relaxed. So it sounds like that's the kind of activities that you're suggesting.
Right. This idea of trying to switch from sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, to our parasympathetic kind of natural rest and digest system. And you're so right. Gratitude, I think, is having its day in the sun, and neuroscience is a wonderful thing for your brain. Practicing these even small moments of gratitude in the long term can really benefit your brain and your overall brain health. So that's fantastic that you do that. And so it's the idea of, yes, let's have some type of wind down routine that we do, and within that wind down routine, something that can help your nervous system relax a little bit. And breathing is great because deep breathing kind of forces you to move from a sort of sympathetic dominant to parasympathetic dominant nervous system. So that's a wonderful thing to do. And I'm just giving different examples because we're all different. And so what works for me may not work for the next person, but there's so many things out there you can do, like yoga nidra. You can do, like we talked about, progressive muscle relaxation, reading. I listen to audiobooks because whatever they're saying is way more interesting than what I'm worrying about. So you can try different things and find something that works for you. That thing, I will say, should not be your phone.
Right.
Phones are terrible. iPhones are terrible for sleep, so stay away from that sucker. You don't have to read the whole internet before you go to bed. Maybe
Yep.
I don't want to trigger anybody, but maybe think about putting the phone away an hour before bed. And then other things to do, is to decrease your light at night, let those natural melatonin levels increase, right? You have to be in the dark for that to happen. Cooling down your body temperature can help. So there are a lot of sleep hygiene tips that can help us within our environment to go to sleep a little bit easier.
Yeah, I love that. You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, and we're talking to Dr. Jaime Tartar about alcohol and sleep. And now we're talking to some of the things that can really help you rest, including lowering the temperature of your environment. That one has become pretty critical for me because if it's like 71 degrees, for some reason, I'm like, I can't sleep. If I put it down to 68 degrees, all of a sudden I sleep like a baby. So that environmental temperature is really important to me, and obviously finding a wind down routine. That's just really, really important. Now I wonder if we could talk a little bit because people are going to drink, and this show is by no means anti-alcohol. So what happens when they do drink? Like, what are some of the tips that they can use to get better sleep, even if they're going to have a couple drinks or maybe a drink or two?
Well, I think it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Doing something once in a while isn't going to destroy you. I had a little, like, a mini talk to do, and I had some friends that were also giving a presentation the next day. And we kind of found each other at the hotel, and we each had a drink, and we were hanging out, and we were talking, and we stayed up late, and we had to all get up the next morning to give our presentations. And sort of like I said earlier, I wasn't worried about it. Once in a while is usually not a problem, and I would do the same thing again. Because one of the things we also want to recognize is the other thing that your brain really needs to be healthy is social relationships. Loneliness is a killer for our brain.
Wow.
It's worse for your health than smoking, right? Loneliness is terrible. And so sometimes when we have these social moments and have a beer and we're feeling, that appreciation for our friends and kind of that, loving feeling, that's wonderful. And so once in a while, it shouldn't be a problem for anybody. Usually it's when we do things, it's like most things that do us in, right? Timing and dose. Like, how often are we doing it, and at what level are we doing it? So I think, having a glass of wine once in a while with friends, there's not really a health benefit of drinking the alcohol. Like, they've shown the Mediterranean diet tends to be good for your overall health, even though that includes some wine with it. And it turns out it's not the wine. The wine doesn't help. The resveratrol that's in the wine, it's not really helping you.
Right.
It's that it's part of this larger picture. So the wine doesn't seem to hurt you when you're doing so many other things that are good. So it's almost like, despite the fact that you're drinking some wine, having that Mediterranean diet seems to be overall beneficial.
That's right. What we say is that while there's no amount of alcohol that's healthy for you, it can be incorporated into a healthy lifestyle. And I love that you mentioned the social wellness aspect of it, because it's really important to what we talk about too. And I think that, you hit the nail on the head in talking about the fact that we need these relationships. I think you said loneliness is a killer, which just got me right there. It is. And we really have to be concerned about that. And an easy way to reach out to somebody is be like, hey, do you want to have a drink? And to be clear, the way I put it is that you can have that with or without alcohol, right? And even if that person's drinking, you can have a non-alcoholic drink. And more places are actually incorporated non-alcoholic drinks in their menus. Some are even trying to incorporate ingredients that could be helpful for stress or what have you, but they're called functional ingredients. We won't go into all of that right now, but I think that's very interesting. There's even this whole sleepy girl cocktail thing that happened on the internet for a while, and that was really interesting to see that people were like kind of turning towards cocktails without alcohol to try to encourage sleep at night. So I think that is a really excellent way to do it, and it could theoretically be part of a end of the night routine. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's actually part of my end of the night routine. There's, without saying any brand names, but I do they're really fancy, drinks at night, and they have the adaptogens in them, like the L-theanine, things that are good for our health. And I make these things, I baby myself so much. So my husband thinks I'm ridiculous, but I get my little drink that comes in a can, and I'm like, no, that's not fancy. So I'll pour it into like a really fancy cocktail glass, and sometimes I'll salt the rim, and I'll put like some limes in there. And it, like, I think you and I had talked about before, it feels special. And I think that's what I love so much about it. It does have those sort of calming, quote unquote, adaptogens, but it helps me as part of my wind down routine kind of relax and feel special. And my drink looks special. And I think that's great. And when I go to a bar with my friends and I don't want to drink, I will be the most extra person. The bartenders probably hate me, but I'll be like, can you add some soda water and some pineapple juice and then maybe put a little lime on the side?
I can assure you that as a former bartender, that sometimes that stuff can be annoying. But for the most part, the person that annoyed me the most was the person who was absolutely hammered asking for more drinks, right? Because I know that person was essentially ungovernable. Like I had to, and talking about babying somebody, that was literally had to like, come here, do this, but when somebody is staying sober for the night or forever, whatever it is, and they are being responsible and they're just asking reasonable requests from the bartender, I thought that's kind of nice. I like that part of it. So
worth it for them.
Yeah. Right. Would you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
No, I just try to be funny when I'm ordering it. So I try to make it worth it, which probably makes it even more annoying for both of us.
It depends how good the joke is, to be honest with you.
But I do think, I sort of joke around about, babying myself or babying ourselves. But honestly, I think we all have a really hard life. Everybody has a really hard life. Our brains are struggling all the time. And it's okay to be kind to you. You only get one brain.
Right.
Brain cells are non-dividing cells. You don't get more. So I think doing these things for ourselves, it's great, and we shouldn't think of it as weak. It's not weak to take basic care of your central nervous system. It's not weak to try to keep your neurons nourished and happy. No. And so just thinking about that sleep environment, we should spend a third of our lives asleep. What can we do to help help ourselves create this what we sometimes talk about as a sleep oasis? If I walk into, and I don't know if you've done this, but if you've ever walked into a spa, how you just feel relaxed, right? Because the music is and the smells and all of it is just so nice. And so I always think, like, why can't my bedroom be an oasis like this? If I have this sort of visceral, basic response to this environment, why? So I try always to keep my bedroom like a very relaxing oasis, so that when I walk in, I can feel relaxed. My bed in my bedroom is not a place I work. It's not a place where I do other things, so that it's somewhere I get to go to. I've earned that, at the end of the day, to go into this amazing, relaxing environment and just allow my brain to have some time to get healthy. And I think it's okay to do that.
That's wonderful. And I try to practice that too. I keep my cell phone away from my bedroom. And that has done wonders for me. I don't wake up immediately all the time. Sometimes I do if I have to like set an extra alarm or whatever, but usually I'm separate from it. And I don't do any work in the bed. And my partner, she works in the bed. She will have the laptop in her lap. She'll be looking on her phone. And, she is a debate champion. Literally, she was a national debate champion. And so I never win any arguments. But you have just given me the fuel to go win an argument. And I really appreciate that, Jamie.
I know. It's like, oh, man, I don't know how you're going to argue. You're just going to go. I would go down, I think, if I tried to explain it. So I think it's a general idea. And you can tell her if you want. I tell someone, at the end of the day, your phone is not your girlfriend and it's not your boyfriend, and it just doesn't belong in your bed with you, right? It doesn't belong in your bedroom at all.
I love that. Keep your phone out of the bedroom. Okay, so I have to ask one question. I think I'm probably on most people's minds because it was a common statement that people have made. Does alcohol kill brain cells?
So what we see is a long-term use of alcohol can cause some pretty detrimental changes in the brain. And so what we see are areas of the brain, they're not quite as active, like your frontal lobe that we associate with making sure that we can make good decisions and
Right.
planning things out. We see these microstructure and macrostructures, or large and small changes to the brain. And one of the common things that show up is a reduction in gray matter
Oh, wow.
in the brains of people who are chronic alcohol users. And so gray matter in the brain is usually the brain cells, whereas the white matter is the gooey stuff that covers the communication sort of cables. So we do see a pretty significant, we can see a pretty significant reduction in gray matter. So what does, indicate that there is some brain cell loss.
Can we recover it? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quick answer is I don't know that we know exactly how much, but I think there's definitely some studies to suggest that anytime we stop doing something that's bad for us, we can recover and we can rebound. The brain is plastic, and so while we don't create new neurons throughout our life, with some minor exceptions, and we're not even sure what they do, we can constantly build connections. So when we talk about brain plasticity, we don't necessarily mean getting new neurons. What we really mean is that the connections between neurons can grow. So we can get increased thickness and increase what we could think of as like arborization of neurons. So just keeping your brain healthy, nourished, it's the trifecta, right? Eating right, exercising, and sleeping are just the most wonderful things you can do for your brain.
Wow. Well, yeah, I'm going to get right to it. That is amazing. And before we sign off, I just want to know what you're up to these days, because I know that you've been doing a lot of work with the Society for Sports Neuroscience and a lot of conferences and that sort of thing. What are you up to these days apart from studying stress and sleep?
Well, I think I've taken my research into a little bit of a new direction. Like I said earlier, I think I'm kind of tired of giving people sleep deprivation and giving people stress. I don't want to go to like the evil scientist hell when I retire. So now I'm trying to work on some positive research studies. So we just wrapped up a study looking at if we can use yoga nidra, which is sort of a sleep yoga, if we can get some sleep-like activity during that. And we're trying to look at whether or not lucid dreaming, we can induce lucid dreaming. And then if that can help with people, with their motion processing. So I think I'm much more interested these days in sort of how can we use neuroscience and research in such a way to help people have healthier brains and healthier sleep patterns.
Oh, that's fantastic. I have done the yoga nidra before. It's really great. It's very relaxing. I've never done lucid dreaming. Have you ever lucid dreamt
No,
before?
we studied it and we have the protocols to implement it. I've never been able to. There seems to be a lot of individual variability, but they've used it, with some PTSD studies, and it does seem to show some benefits for spending 90 minutes a night, right, processing our emotion. Why can't we kind of tap into that and help that time a little bit?
Well, one of the things that's really interesting, and I meant to wrap up, but I want to mention this because I don't dream lucidly. I don't remember most of my dreams, but one of the things that I can do, and that was the basis of my last book, is I can put a problem in my brain before I go to sleep. And I don't mean like a really emotionally charged problem. I mean like a simple work problem, and wake up, and sometimes I'll get the answer as though I like put it in a machine, and I wake up in the morning, it's like, and I just write it down.
Yeah, that's one of those other functions that we didn't get to of REM sleep. So it does help with emotion, but it also seems to serve some problem solving capabilities. And so next time we can talk about how that happens.
Well, I would love to have you back to talk about that. In the meantime, how can our guests learn more about you?
Well, the Society for Sports Neuroscience is on Instagram as Society for Sports Neuroscience. So they can always follow us there, and our website, Society for Sports Neuroscience. And I am at NSU, Florida, so you can always find me there.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners. If you could take a brief moment to leave a comment, or share this podcast with someone you think might enjoy it, I would love that. Your participation is really what makes this worth it. And as always, here's to drinking mindfully.